Okay, I'll go ahead and start. So as I said, welcome to the session on building diversity, equity, and inclusion into new LSSTC programs. I'm very happy that you've all decided to join this session. My name is Jenna Sokolowski. I'm the Director for Science at LSST Corporation. And today we'll have Andy Connolly serving as our moderator and Kim Briamonte serving as our scribe. And so before I go to the reminder slides, which are probably all very familiar with right now, I wanted to set the stage a little bit for what we'll be talking about today. Way back before the pandemic in 2019, the head of the director of the science programs for the Heinz Simons Foundation was passing through New York City, and we met for coffee. At that meeting, I had the opportunity to tell her about a new program that LSST Corporation is putting together, a very big, ambitious program. And we also discussed the opportunity that putting together something new provides for testing out and implementing best practices for increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion in astrophysics. So, when you start something new, we can do things in a new way. So after that conversation, come April, the Heinz Simons Foundation actually funded us to do just that, to implement and test some best practices for increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion in this specific large program that LSST Corporation is building. So today, I will spend about 20 minutes reviewing that program, remind you what the corporation is for those who are not so familiar, review that program, which is called LINC, the LSST Interdisciplinary Network for Collaboration in Computing. Some of you might have heard about it yesterday, and some of you who are participating are very deeply involved in LINC, so you know about it already. But after we go over that, then we're gonna split everyone, distribute you randomly into small discussion groups of no more than 5 people. And there you'll do an activity that was suggested to us by our DEI consultant that we're working with, named Joyce Yen, who's the director of the advanced program at University of Washington. So here are the reminders. I will go through some again because it's particularly important in small discussion sessions that we adhere to the principles of trust, respect, diversity, and welcomeness to diversity and inclusion in those discussions. And if you want an extra reminder, there were some nice instructions provided in the previous session about recommendations for how to have a successful and respectful small discussion. Not only that, if you witness any form of bullying or aggression, there are people that have been assigned as contact people, and one of those is actually our moderator for this session, Andy Connolly. Other reminders, although this portion of the session will be recorded, the breakout rooms will not be recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded here, just turn off your video, but in the breakout rooms, you don't have to worry about that. Also, feel free to ask questions or post comments at any time in the Slack channel or the Zoom chat. And our moderator will be having a look at those forums. Okay, so for those who are a little less familiar with the corporation, what is LSSTC? We are a member-based nonprofit organization that is distinct from the federally funded LSST project. We have the goal of maximizing the scientific output and societal impact of LSST. And the way our current strategy is to use private philanthropy to initiate programs that benefit the wide LSST science community. And of course, because we're a member-based organization, in all our programs, we try to build in some extra benefits for researchers from LSSTC member institutions. Those members include about 30 institutions, and those are institutions working together to get the most out of LSST for the researchers in their department and also, of course, for the broader community. LSSTC, although we're distinct from the federally funded project, we do have a long relationship with the project. And in fact, we helped get LSSTC started. We also work closely with the science collaborations. And as Federico Bianca mentioned earlier in the science collaborations session, they have a seat on our executive board filled by the Science Collaborations Coordinator, and we also have a Science Collaborations Advisory Committee that we turn to for advice and input onto our fundraising efforts, among other things. Okay, so in preparation for the activity that we're all going to be doing in a little less than 20 minutes, it would be helpful if everyone is familiar with the program that we call LINC. This, once again, LSST, Interdisciplinary Network for Collaboration and Computing. This is a large a set of interrelated programs that is has the goal of providing the community with needed training, user-generated analysis tools, and also support for collaboration. And it's coordinated in a way that makes it a very large program. The actual amount of funding that we're requesting for this from various donors is in the tens of millions of dollars. So that would enable it to have a really extended impact throughout the community. And packaging a lot of programs together also helps us in the way of being able to pitch multiple programs to donors at once. So it's a multi-faceted program. Programs included in LINC include a postdoctoral fellowship program, workshops of various type as desired by the community, such as boot camps or summer schools, science collaboration meetings, whatever kind of thing you can dream up, and also some workshops that would be organized around a certain theme or task that could provide seed funding to participants in those workshops. LINC also would include programs for incubators or visiting fellowship programs where individual researchers could spend some time with a group of software engineers or data scientists and work on, develop their own project, and ideally with some grant support. Now, to make all these programs into a coherent umbrella program that we can pitch and discuss with donors, these things will be coordinated through a network of data science centers. And we envision that the number of those centers will grow with time. At these centers, we will place teams of software engineers who will work with local academics and visiting academics and data scientists to help the creation of the user-generated analysis tools that will be so important for getting a lot out of LSST data. Now, to get LINC set up, it's unlikely that this will happen in one fell swoop. There are very few donors or foundations that have a checkbook that can write a $50 million check, for example. So the more likely way this will happen is in phases. And so, for example, right now we're in discussion with a large foundation that has picked out certain pieces of LINC that they're particularly interested in. Those are a postdoctoral fellowship program. And I should say these are definitely not guaranteed to happen at this point. We're in discussion. This is an example of how LINC could come into existence. This foundation is interested in a postdoctoral fellowship program and possibly setting up 2 of the data science centers. And they have some interest in specific types of workshops that would enable the community to provide input into work being done at those data science centers, or maybe beta test software, things like that. So I'm bringing this up because when you're doing the activity in a few minutes, you're going to be thinking about this LINC program. And I want you to also think about the individual components, because it might not all happen at once. Now, before I go on to start talking about the DEI aspect of what we'll be doing with LINC, I wonder if there are any questions that people have about this umbrella program. Like Andy, are there any questions coming in that we should pause to address?
We had two questions in the Zoom channel. One, which was answered by Michael Strauss, but you might want to touch on it, and is from John Swinbank, who was asking whether the use of the word LSST, as opposed to Rubin, meant that LSSTC was focused on the survey rather than the observatory in general.
To be honest, I think it's a little more historic. We started with LSST and have been busy trying to make the program a reality more than actually thinking about whether we should rename it. So that's, I don't know that you should read anything into that.
And then a second question from Luis Pineda, which was, are we considering arts programs or residencies for artist collaboration similar to what CERN has been doing?
Not currently, although we are in the very early stages of designing this program and pitching it. And if a donor was interested or asked us about something like that, then we would certainly be open to that possibility. Currently, it has not yet come up in our sort of bare bones framework that we're starting with.
And then Meredith Rawls asks, are there specific limitations for the kinds of things LINC can't fund? Or only driven by what the donors prefer? Oh,
that's a great question. I appreciate that. So two sides to that. One is we're less limited than a lot of federal grants in that we can fund things that are international. We can fund, LINC could be more focused on tools in some cases rather than specific hypothesis testing like you normally are required to do with an NSF grant. In terms of the donor's intent, there is some restriction there, definitely. And I'd like to think of it more as a partnership because with private donors, unlike with federal agencies, we can have a lot of, or I say federal agencies, when you're submitting your own PI grant, for example, it's not a conversation. You submit that grant and you get a yes or no. Whereas with a private donor or foundation, we can have a conversation with them. So if we present an idea that we think is fabulous and they like some part, but they feel uncomfortable with another part, that's something that might influence we try to find an area of commonality. So there is some restrictions there, yes, but we can also open conversations with our donors to try to do what we think is best.
Okay, and we have a couple more questions coming in. One from Nino Cucciara, which is, are there plans to engage diverse donors like those from either African Americans or those from Latinx origins?
Thanks for that question, Nino. We would love to do that. Our challenge there is identifying those donors and having a conduit to get us in the door. So if any of you on this call have any contacts for us, we would be more than willing to go meet any such donors and give a fantastic presentation and such. But the challenge has been with individual donors, identifying them and having a personal contact to introduce us.
Okay, and the last question is from Chuck Claver, who asks about what role does LSSC see Envisage in terms of undergraduates and graduate students in addition to the postdocs that were mentioned in the program?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So currently, we're working with a few of the LSST member institutions where we anticipate placing the first data science centers. And one of the things that we're hoping that those institutions have generally agreed to provide some matching contribution to this program. And a lot of that matching comes in the form of support for graduate students and their local academic student population, which would be funded by those institutions. Now, in terms of visitors from other institutions or programs that could be broadly applicable to grad students and undergrads, I don't see any reason why not. We started with just conceiving of a postdoc program because there was a lot of demand for that. But at this point, LINC is fairly open. If there's a high demand for a particular type of program that would allow us to help the scientific preparation of the LSST community, we would certainly be happy to think about if that could work in.
And those are all the questions.
Great. All right, so as I mentioned in my intro, starting something new provides an opportunity for us to try to do things in a way that fosters diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the Heising-Simons Foundation gave us a grant to address exactly that question with LINC. How can we do things with this new program? How can we do them better than a lot of institutions have done before or other broad programs have done before? So our plan is over the next 2 years to organize a series of workshops, probably virtual in the next year because of the pandemic, but workshops to bring diverse voices that have often been excluded to the table, and then to design LINC in a way with that participation in a way that fosters diversity, equity, and inclusion. So you've heard talks already today about DEI, and there was not a lot of discussion about funding. So just mention here, you could ask, do you need funding? Why does funding help in this process? So for us, it offers 2 big opportunities. One is the opportunity to work with expert consultants. And because we're not experts, we're all trying to do the best we can, and we have great ambitions, but it helps to have some people whose profession it is to increase diversity on board. And it also provides travel funds, which hopefully when the pandemic is over will mean that funding will be less of a barrier to participation in the design process than it would be otherwise. Okay, so that's the value of having this grant. Now we also face some limitations and challenges. One is actually was mentioned by, I think, Meredith Rawls earlier, which is, are there constraints from donors? And in fact, our plans must excite donors whose primary interest in some cases is science and the scientific outcome. Right now, of course, there are a lot of people who've been made a lot more aware about racism in this country. And so I think a lot of donors are very interested in that, but it's a partnership that we have to work with. Another limitation is that we must work within the purview of LINC. So whatever program that, let's say, gets funded in phase 1, maybe it's a postdoc fellowship and 2 data science centers, then it would be hard for us to address, the high school pipeline problem in that phase 1, for example. Okay, so we're getting ready for the activity. I think I'm relatively on time. So this has been shortened to fit in the restricted time of the project and community workshop. But it's an example of the kind of things that we might be doing over the course of our various design processes over the next year or 2 in our LINC DEI focused design workshops. And in that process, I can't remember if I just mentioned earlier, but the first year will be focused a lot on the community building a diverse and inclusive community rather than the design work itself. And then, although of course we'll be having all kinds of discussions about what works and what doesn't in astrophysics and what's needed. And year 2 will be focused more on actually setting the policies for LINC and also using that community, those community connections that we developed in year 1 to help bring people into that process and hopefully into full participation in LINC. So the notes from today's activity, oh yeah, just so you know, this activity is not just as an exercise. We will keep track of the notes, and even though we have not yet built the diverse and inclusive community that we want to listen to as we go forward, today's activity, the notes will in fact be part of the process for potentially affecting the rest of the workshops and the policies for LINC. Okay, so here are the instructions for the activity. In just a minute, I'm going to ask Kevin to put people into their breakout rooms, but I wanted to mention one, and so I'm not going to go through reading these instructions now, but one thing I wanted to mention that we learned yesterday in our breakout rooms is that it's very helpful if the moderator, because of these small groups, does more than just monitor the chat, but actually leads the discussion a little bit by walking through the instructions one by one and making sure that everyone has a chance to participate. So Kevin, if you could put us into the correct number of breakout rooms now, everyone, you'll have, I think, about 30 minutes to do the activity.
Sure. Just a warning, a few people are going to choose not to join the rooms.
Okay.
You might end up with a room that has not enough people, in which case I will move you to a different room. So if you're in a group of only 2, expect to be moved. Apologies for that. That's just the way it works. So here we go.
So Jenna, we have 8 minutes left. How do you want to walk through group by group, or what's your plan?
Jenna, you're muted.
I don't think we're going to get through.
Yes, I got
through
that.
all
I was
13 groups in 8 minutes.
Thanks for pointing that out, Pat. So I think it would be great if people could post at least one key takeaway in the Slack channel. And we might not have time to go through all the groups, but if people could post, and then maybe Andy, you can look through those if there's some particular ones you want to call out.
Okay, will do. And I will take a copy of the chat, because there's some really useful comments in the chat for Zoom. I'll remove all names from it, so we can just actually keep the information, but not the actual names associated with it.
So if anybody does want to share, we do have a few minutes. I thought our discussion was really interesting. So if other people had also interesting things that came up in their discussion, I'd love to use the last few minutes to hear if someone wants to raise their hand. No, of course, I don't know how to see people have raised hands.
I can tell you if someone raises their hand.
Okay, thanks.
But there was, so Pat, do you want to go?
Yeah, so one in our group was that postdocs are very late in the pipeline. And so going along with the spirit of the humor of it, we said, so if you want everything to go wrong, make sure you only focus on postdocs and never focus on high school students and undergraduates.
And just speaking to one of the comments in the Slack from Michael Woodvasey, which kind of adds on to what Pat was saying, Link can actually fill in the spaces between individual donors and agencies in terms of setting priorities across LSST Corporation as a whole. So you can create a coherent program from high school through to junior and maybe more beyond junior faculty. But to do this is going to require a lot of adeptness and finesse in terms of how you provide the support for that. And then Rob Boville says, when funding workshops, allocate funding for participation by members of underrepresented groups or from those institutes with less travel funding, and advertise these prominently to these groups. I don't know, Jenna, do you want to address the question about how to be agile in terms of funding?
Can I, I've got my hand raised, but is Dara?
Go ahead, Dara.
I'm going to push back a little bit on the whole pipeline thing. And the reason I'm going to do this is because we've been doing a lot of pipeline work for a long time, and I still sit in rooms of 200 people where I'm the only Black scientist in the room. And so one thing that I don't see happening is people really working with retaining folks in our community who already either have broached our community or and become estranged, or who would like to become part of our community. So especially as a collaboration and not as a department. I mean, for each of the departments, I think there is a really big place for people to be looking at pipeline. But as far as LSS or Ruben and the corporation, I would like to see some emphasis on how we engage with minority folks who are already astronomers in our who could be in our sphere and we have not reached out to. and maybe their students. I think there's a lot of focus on students when we're not focusing on the people who are engaging those students and being making them partners.
Can I go even further? This is Nino.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only the engagement, but I want to stress the retention of those faculty, the collaboration between Rubin and those faculty, providing the support, both financially, which help them get out of the teaching assignments that will essentially hinder their relationship with the science production, is important.
I think this is an interesting question about what is the best fit for this program, because one of our goals for this session was to not so much think about the whole astronomy community, but to think about what can LINC do, given what its scientific goals are, what's the best fit? Like, how can we have the most impact in terms of diversity? And so I wonder, I appreciate your point, Dara, that maybe retention and support is more appropriate focus for us than, say, high school, where we really have very little connection to high school students, or how that would help prepare the scientific community for LSST.
So there's lots of great comments and questions coming up in the Slack. I think we will collect all of those, given that we only have a couple of minutes left. Jenna, do you want to talk about next steps?
So after this, we have a small proto-organizing committee for our Heising-Simons funded project to design LINC in a way that increases diversity. So we're going to start meet after this meeting to start the community building stage, trying to figure out who should be at the table. And so one of the things that we hope that you would get to at the bottom of the instruction slide was, if any participants here have suggestions for up to 5 institutions that we should reach out to, or organizations, we would really appreciate that, because the next step will be really bringing the voices into the conversation and starting to figure out, to plan a series of virtual workshops to bring those voices into the conversation. Oh, and also, if any people who participated today want to still stay involved and go to those workshops, please email me or Kim, and our emails are at the bottom. I don't know if you're still seeing my screen.
Yes.
Okay. Feel free to let us know so we can include you on participant lists and invite lists for those future workshops. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for participating. This was really valuable, and I look forward to going through all the questions and comments and putting it all together and getting ready to start this whole long process of building LINC in a way that hopefully will be a benefit for the community in multiple different ways. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenna.
Thank you.
Hey, Kevin, could you stay on for a second?
Yeah, you bet.
Could you, I don't seem to be able to copy the chat. Do you have to be a host to be able to copy that?
Hey,
I was trying as well.
This is something that we're trying to figure out. We probably need Rand Powell, seems to be the only one that knows how to copy the Zoom chat.
Yeah, so real quick, you cannot copy an individual chat channel. You have to copy the entire workspace.
No, we're talking about Zoom, right?
Yeah, Zoom.
Sorry,
Zoom.
sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So some people can do it. I can't. What you do is you just use your mouse to highlight all the way from the bottom to the top, and then you drag it over to an empty document.
Okay, I will give that a try.
A few people can try that. It doesn't work for me, but it works for John Swinbank, and it's worked for some other people.
It does not work for me.
Okay. I don't know if there's anyone else still on that can try. We have 9 people on.
I'm going to give it a shot.
I'm trying right now too.
The other thing, is this recorded? It is recorded. Okay, it will come in the, it will be in the video So all the chat will show as the video is played. It's not the ideal way to capture it, but that means it is still there.
Does it actually?
Also, I went ahead and did screenshots of it. So I'm just going to finish up that. I didn't get this end part, so at least we'll have that captured. I'm doing screenshots. I've been doing screenshots of it, so I'll get that.
Will got it.
Got it. Great.
Have it in a text file. I'll send it to you. Who was asking for it? Andy?
Yeah, if you want to put it in, do you have access to the doc?
Yeah, sure. I put the stuff in group setting. You want to put it at the end of the doc or something like that?
If you put it at the end of the doc, I'll take out all the names.
All right.
Yeah, I've got it too, Andy.
Thank you, Will. Appreciate that. Thanks.
All right.
Andy, I'll email you what I've got.
Great, thank you.
All right, it's there at the bottom of the document, Andy.
Got it. Thanks a bunch.
All right.
I'm gonna log on.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.